Hello and welcome to Indus News, live from Islamabad. I am Muneeb Hamid with the news of this hour. Let's begin with the top stories first. A US intelligence assessment says the Taliban could isolate Afghanistan's capital in 30 days and potentially take it over in 90. This comes as Taliban fighters took control of 9 provincial capitals in 6 days as foreign forces continue to withdraw. The Russian defense minister has also confirmed that the Taliban have taken control of Afghanistan's border with Uzbekistan and Tajikistan. Pakistan's Army Chief General Qamar Javed Bajwa says Afghan peace is a shared responsibility and all stakeholders must play their part to achieve the cause. Addressing a Corps Commanders Conference, Bajwa said misperceptions and blame games must be avoided to counter the designs of peace spoilers. He added Pakistan has made every possible effort to facilitate the Afghan peace process and will continue to do so. The forum also reviewed the implications of the evolving situation in Afghanistan on the internal security of Pakistan. Pakistan's National Security Advisor says Afghanistan and India are peddling a disinformation campaign on social media to malign Pakistan internationally. At a press conference, Moeed Yusuf said the Afghan government is trying to shift the blame of its failures through fake news. He added Pakistan is the victim of the Afghan war and it wants peace in the neighboring country. In Algeria, 65 people, including soldiers, have died in wildfires that erupted in the east of the capital, Algiers. Prime Minister Imran bin Abdulrahman says the government has asked for help from the international community. He said they are also in talks with partners to hire planes to extinguish the fires. Brazil has reported over 1,200 deaths and more than 34,000 infections overnight. Meanwhile, in Pakistan, 81 more people have lost their lives to the virus, while nearly 4,800 tested positive in the last 24 hours. Globally, the coronavirus has claimed more than 4.3 million lives and infected over 204 million people so far. And in the Kashmir Premier League, Rawla Court Hawks beat Bark Stallions by 5 wickets in the 10th fixture of the mega event. They comfortably chased down the target of 157 runs with 10 balls to spare, thanks to Kashif Ali's 50. Well, these were the top stories. News in detail after a short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. Now let's have the news in detail. A US intelligence assessment says the Taliban could isolate Afghanistan's capital in 30 days and potentially take it over in 90 days. This comes as Taliban fighters took control of 9 provincial capitals in 6 days as foreign forces continue to withdraw. The Russian defense minister has also confirmed that the Taliban have taken control of Afghanistan's border with Uzbekistan and Tajikistan. On Tuesday, a senior EU official said Taliban forces now control 65% of the territory. The rapid gains by the Taliban and the deteriorating security situation in Afghanistan has rung alarm bells internationally. But US President Joe Biden said on Tuesday that he did not regret his decision to pull US troops out of Afghanistan after more than 20 years. He said the Afghan troops outnumber the Taliban and must want to fight. Pakistan's Army Chief General Qamar Javed Bajwa says Afghan peace is a shared responsibility and all stakeholders must play their part to achieve the cause. Addressing a Corps Commanders Conference, Bajwa said misperceptions and blame games must be avoided to counter the designs of peace spoilers. He added Pakistan has made every possible effort to facilitate the Afghan peace process and will continue to do so. The forum also reviewed the implications of the evolving situation in Afghanistan on the internal security of Pakistan. The Army Chief expressed satisfaction over measures being taken for ensuring effective border management. Meanwhile, Pakistan's National Security Advisor says Afghanistan and India are peddling a disinformation campaign on social media to malign Pakistan internationally. At a press conference, Moeed Yusuf said the Afghan government is trying to shift the blame of its failures through fake news. Yusuf said senior Afghan officials are involved in anti-Pakistan campaigns, adding that the government will continue to expose such attempts. He added Pakistan is the victim of the Afghan war and it wants peace in the neighbouring country. He also regretted the global silence on response to Indian propaganda against Pakistan. The remarks came as authorities revealed a deep analytics report that dissects anti-Pakistan trends over the last 2 years. Now, 6 EU member states have warned against halting deportations of Afghan asylum seekers despite fierce fighting in Afghanistan. The request was made in a letter by the Netherlands, Austria, Denmark, Belgium, Greece and Germany. They said if the bloc stops returning the asylum seekers, it will motivate more Afghans to leave their country for the European Union. The 6 nations urged the EU Commission to intensify talks with the Afghan government for the return of its citizens. Over 44,000 Afghans have requested asylum in the EU last year alone. Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan has appreciated Turkey's strong and consistent support on the Jammu and Kashmir dispute. He was in a meeting with Turkey's Defence Minister Hulusi Akar in Islamabad. The Prime Minister's office said he reiterated that Pakistan will continue to make every effort to help advance the Afghan peace process. Khan also underlined the importance of an inclusive, broad-based and comprehensive Afghan settlement. The Prime Minister also expressed deep concern over the forest fires in Turkey and offered assistance to Ankara. Earlier, the visiting dignitary called on Army Chief General Qamar Javed Bajwa to discuss the Afghan peace process. Iraq's Foreign Minister Fawad Hussain says the Kashmir dispute must be resolved through dialogue. He was addressing a press conference along with his Pakistani counterpart, Shah Mahmood Qureshi, in Islamabad. He went on to say that the situation in Afghanistan is a cause for concern due to rampant violence to resolve the conflict. The minister also acknowledged Pakistan's positive role in the Afghan peace process. On his part, Qureshi said Pakistan will continue to facilitate a peaceful Afghanistan despite the negative statements emanating from some quarters within Afghanistan. Now, the United States and Germany has called on China to immediately release a Canadian businessman sentenced to 11 years for espionage. Michael Spavor has been detained since 2018 after being arrested with fellow Canadian ex-diplomat Michael Kovrig. The verdict will test a strained relationship between the Canadian and Chinese governments. It comes as an extradition battle involving Meng Wanzhou, a senior executive at Chinese tech giant Huawei, takes place in Canada. Meanwhile, China has urged the European Union to earnestly respect the spirit of the rule of law and the country's judicial sovereignty. This comes after the European Union's External Action Service expressed concern over the death penalty verdict for a convicted Canadian drug smuggler. The Chinese mission to the EU termed the statement a reckless interference in China's internal affairs. A spokesperson for the mission called on the body to stop making irresponsible remarks. In a statement, he said every country takes a hard line on drug-related crimes. The spokesperson added the death sentence or the crimes will help deter and prevent such menaces. Now, Israel's Foreign Minister Yair Lapid has begun a visit to Morocco, the first by Israel's top diplomat since an upgrading of ties under a US brokered deal. Leading a ministerial delegation on a 2-day visit, Lapid will inaugurate Israel's diplomatic mission in Rabat. Morocco was one of the 4 Arab countries, along with the UAE, Bahrain and Sudan, to move towards normalizing relations with Israel last year. The agreement angered Palestinians seeking to have an independent state in the Israeli-occupied territory. Now, Qatar has appointed an ambassador to Saudi Arabia in a further sign of improved ties. The appointment comes months after Riyadh and its allies agreed to end a row with their Gulf neighbor. Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Bahrain and Egypt cut ties with Qatar in 2017, accusing it of supporting terrorism, a charge Qatar denies. Saudi Arabia has already reinstated its ambassador to Doha. Now, Brazil has reported over 1,200 deaths and more than 34,000 infections overnight. Globally, the virus has claimed more than 4.3 million lives and infected over 204 million people so far. Details about the pandemic in this report.
The recent surge of COVID-19, driven by the Indian Delta variant, has worsened the global coronavirus vaccine divide. The World Health Organization has urged the 20 most powerful nations to overturn the disgraceful global imbalance in access to vaccines. China says it has sent some 770 million doses of vaccines to over 100 countries and organizations, ranking first in the world in terms of vaccine donations. The United Kingdom is preparing to offer COVID-19 booster jabs in the country from the next month. Meanwhile, German Chancellor Angela Merkel says her country's vaccination drive is not satisfactory.
Jetzt haben wir genug Impfstoff.
We now have enough vaccines and we must lobby so that people can get vaccinated. On an European scale, we are no longer at the top. There is a number of countries which do better and which are more vaccination friendly. As of today, 55.1% of the population is fully vaccinated and 62.5% have been vaccinated once.
The Delta variant is now wreaking havoc in the Oceania. New Zealand has designated Indonesia and Fiji as very high-risk countries due to the escalating COVID-19 case numbers. Australia has also extended lockdown in its second biggest city of Melbourne for a second week amid surging Delta cases. Meanwhile, South Korea continues to grapple with its worst outbreak to date due to the Delta variant and reported record new daily cases.
With the recent spread of the more transmissible Delta virus, the number of confirmed cases is increasing, showing mass infection cases from workplace, indoor sports facilities, churches, and nursing hospitals. Along with that, the rate of investigating the path of infection is also rising, which means silent spreaders within communities are increasing.
In Thailand, police fired tear gas and rubber bullets at protesters calling for the government to resign over its handling of the pandemic. Meanwhile, in the U.S. state of Louisiana, hospitals are struggling to keep up with a huge surge in COVID-19 patients, also fueled by the Delta variant.
Meanwhile, Pakistan has reported 81 deaths from coronavirus in the past 24 hours, raising the total to 24,085. The Health Ministry says over 4,800 people tested positive overnight, and the positivity rate was 7.5. Pakistan has so far reported over 1,080,000 cases. The ministry says more than 972,000 people have recovered from the disease. It noted over 39 million doses of vaccine have been administered to date. Pakistan's Prime Minister has called for research in the agricultural sector for economic prosperity in the country. Imran Khan said this in an address to the Farmers' Convention in Bahawalpur. Khan said he has envisioned an increased support to the farmers to increase their income and reduce economic disparity. He said he will provide fiscal assistance and technological support to the farmers in the country. Khan said welfare of the agriculture sector is vital for economic developments in Pakistan. Pakistan is observing National Minority Day to commemorate the contribution of minorities to the progress of the country. In a historic speech on this day in 1947, Quaid-e-Azam pledged to protect minorities' rights in the newly created country. Muhammad Ali Jinnah said the state has no business to be interfering in an individual's religion, caste or creed. Events, seminars and social gatherings are arranged across the country by members of various religious minorities. In their messages, President Arif Alvi and Prime Minister Imran Khan promised protection of all rights of minorities living inside Pakistan. Alvi said the government has been making consistent efforts for the welfare and facilitation of minorities. Imran Khan noted the government has empowered the Minorities Commission to play its mandated role in an effective manner. More news coming up after a short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. Now, in Myanmar, at least 3 people have died after reportedly jumping from an apartment to escape a security forces raid. Several others have been critically injured in the incident that occurred in Yangon's Bota Tong district. The United Nations Special Envoy on Myanmar, Christine Schreiner-Bergner, has warned of a full-scale civil war in the country. She said the military ruler Min Aung Hlaing appears determined to solidify his grip on power after taking on the Prime Minister's role. Meanwhile, Myanmar's foreign minister says China will provide $6 million to fund development projects in the country. Earlier, Washington announced $50 million aid for COVID relief. Poland's right-wing ruling coalition has collapsed after a small partner announced to leave the government amid rift over a legislation. The outgoing partner called the bill an attack on media freedom. The media bill would prevent non-European owners from having controlling stakes in Polish media companies. Earlier, Prime Minister Mateusz Morawiecki fired the Deputy Prime Minister and the head of the Agreement Party for opposing the bill. Agreement Party leader Jaroslaw Gowin said he viewed the legislation as an attack on media diversity. His party said it was formally withdrawing from the three-party coalition, which is in power since 2015. The party holds 13 seats in the 460-seat lower house of the parliament. Now, the Sudanese foreign minister says the country will hand long-time autocrat Omar al-Bashir to the International Criminal Court over the Darfur conflict. According to the UN, nearly 300,000 people were killed and 2.5 million displaced in the 6-year-long conflict which erupted in 2003. Sudan state media quoted Mariam al-Mahdi saying that the cabinet had decided to hand over Bashir and other wanted officials to the court. Bashir is facing charges of genocide, war crimes and crimes against humanity in Darfur. He ruled Sudan for 3 decades before being deposed in 2019. Moving on, now, Amnesty International says the Ethiopian government forces have been sexually abusing women and girls in restive Tigray. The watchdog says it interviewed medical professionals, humanitarian workers and 63 survivors of sexual violence. In its report, the Amnesty said the survivors had been gang raped while held captive for weeks. 28 survivors identified Eritrean forces as the sole perpetrators of rape. The Amnesty said sexual violence has been used as a weapon of war to inflict lasting physical and psychological damage. It said these occurrences constitute war crimes and may also amount to crimes against humanity. Now, the acute fuel scarcity in Yemen due to a 6-year-long war with still no end in sight has forced citizens to resort to wood logging for a living. The trend has led to severe deforestation in the already war-ravaged Yemen. Details in this report. More than 6 years of war in Yemen has killed tens of thousands of people and left 80% of Yemen's population reliant on aid. The fuel shortages due to a coalition blockade on rebel-held areas forced businesses and families to swap diesel and gas for firewood. Yemeni lumberjack Ali al-Imadi is one such Yemeni who had to turn to logging in his northern Mahwet region to eke out a living for his family. Al-Imadi spends hours chopping down an acacia tree with an axe as his 12-year-old nephew helps out splitting logs. An economic collapse has wiped out the farming and building work he used to travel around the country for.
In the past, you used to go anywhere like Marib, Sada or Sana and you'd be able to make a living to feed yourself and your family. But now there is nothing. Now if you work for one day, it won't last for 5 or 4 days of food. So I decided to stay with my family. If I get something, we eat. At least we live or die together instead of being apart for nothing.
But with the demand for firewood soaring due to fuel shortages, there are now concerns that the country's humanitarian crisis, with millions facing starvation, has compounded the risk of deforestation. This threatens both the environment of Yemen and any hope of a long-term livelihood for men like Imadi.
It's a huge number, but in 1 year, 886,000 trees are felled in Sana'a, which represent 10% of the country's population or the area. So, if we multiply this by 10, the number becomes staggeringly high. Another study says that almost 17.5 tons of wood are burnt by bakeries.
Officials say some 5 million trees have been cut down over the past 3 years across the north in Yemen. Now, 65 people, including soldiers, have died in Algeria amid wildfires that erupted in the east of the capital, Algiers. Prime Minister Imran bin Abdurrahman says the government has sought help from the international community. Let's find out details in this report.
Death, destruction and despair trail the tracks of the wildfires that are raging in various locations across the world. Algeria's defense ministry says several soldiers have been badly injured with burns. Dozens of fires started in the Kabyle region near Algiers and elsewhere, burning houses and trees and killing cattle. Meanwhile, the European Union says it is mobilizing one of Europe's biggest ever common firefighting operations to help the affected countries. This comes as Greece struggles with wildfires ravaging the island of Evia. Meanwhile, Turkey has contained as many as 274 forest fires, while one continues to burn in the Aegean province of Mugula. Over in Peru, the Air Force is called to help battle the wildfires in the country's Cusco region.
We are trying to manage and control the fire. Why? Because as you can see from the helicopter, the fire is very big. So what we want to do and what we are doing is more than just putting it out. It is about controlling so that it doesn't extend further through the area of Lucre.
In Bolivia, wildfires are sweeping across the country's eastern lowlands. They have burned through over 100,000 hectares of forest in the department of Santa Cruz. Attempts to curb the flames have been unsuccessful amid strong winds.
The fire has given us no respite. We have been trying to stop the fire for 4 or 5 days and the weather changes are playing tricks on us. We are coordinating with the police and other institutions to reduce the traffic on the road until the intensity of the fires decreases. Those of us who are here can feel the high temperature and it is oppressive. We will continue fighting for our Chiquitania.
In the United States, the Dixie Fire burning in Northern California has charred some 500,000 acres, making it the second largest wildfire in state history. Temperatures have risen across the Pacific Northwest as residents of Portland, Oregon and Washington prepare for a third heat wave. Meanwhile, in Canada, the White Rock Lake fire continued to smolder in British Columbia.
Now in India, at least 10 people have died and 13 injured after a landslide in the northern state of Himachal Pradesh. Around 30 people are still missing following the incident. In a briefing, a police spokesman said that several vehicles were buried under debris in Kinnaur area. He added 6 vehicles were missing, including a bus with 40 people on board. Rescue operations are underway to search for any survivors. This is the second landslide in the same district in less than a month. Now in Chile, a decade-long drought in the capital, Santiago, has gone from bad to worse due to a scorching July. Officials say that such happenings at the time of the year when the city is usually in rain and snow are clear evidence of global warming. More details in this report.
A lack of precipitation this year has left the towering and typically snow-capped Andes above Santiago mostly bare, reservoir levels low and farm fields parched. The city's central weather station recorded just 78 millimeters of rainfall so far this year. It is drastically less than last year's 180 millimeters and an average amount of 252 millimeters.
We are facing the worst hydrological crisis, the worst drought in our history. We are in the 13th year of drought. We have never had more than 4 consecutive years before. This has been the driest period of Chile's history since the start of the registers.
Some scientists and politicians in Chile are warning of growing and potentially irreversible water shortages in the central region. Officials have warned that two rivers, the Mopacho and the Maipo, that provide Santiago with water are drier than they were in 2019, the driest year in the country's entire history.
Much of the
effects of climate change in the short term and medium term are irreversible. So unfortunately, it is unlikely that the precipitations in Chile's central area of the 80s and 90s will return. That we will recover that type of climate in regards to the temperatures and of extraordinary precipitation. That's unlikely from here on towards the middle of the century.
In a recent report, the United Nations has warned that extreme heat waves, which not long ago struck once every 50 years, are now to be expected once per decade. It said that droughts and downpours might also be much more frequent.
In Indonesia now, university lecturers have developed a robot that delivers food and good wish messages to people in COVID-19 isolation. Details in this report.
This robot is helping Indonesians pass through the testing times of the pandemic by providing food and entertainment to self-isolated COVID-19 patients. It has been assembled from electric household items like pots, pans, and an old television monitor. Renamed the Delta robot after the highly contagious variant of the virus, it has also been modified to spray disinfectants.
Karena dengan kondisi COVID,
with this new Delta variant and the surging number of COVID-19 cases, I decided to turn the robot used for public services into one that sprays disinfectant and delivers food and necessities to residents who are self-isolating. I'm shifting the function to serve only the members of the community who are in need.
The village where the robot operates is in the Surabaya, which is the capital of East Java province and Indonesia's second biggest city. It has been swept up by a devastating second wave of coronavirus infections in the past month.
This robot is only implemented for use in the village, so it is not classified as a high-tech robot. It is quite simple. For the base, a used toy car chassis was used. Then for the power, we used a battery. For the movement, the commands are set through remote controller, and we use an actuator system to create a signal to move the robot.
Indonesia has become the epicenter of Asia's COVID-19 outbreak and recorded more than 3.68 million infections. Meanwhile, the country has suffered 108,000 deaths amid the outbreak.
More news coming up after a short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. Now, the Wall Street stocks have risen, touching new records after the release of inflation data for July. Despite the uptick, the investors were concentrating on the core rate of inflation. The DJI index traded over 0.5% up, while the S&P 500 also gained ground at a fraction, but the Nasdaq Composite traded 0.25% lower. Meanwhile, the oil prices fell after the US called on OPEC to increase production to support the global recovery from the pandemic. And that is all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at Indus.News.